One of my favorite things about Destiny is the proverbial crossroad that we come to whenever it's time to choose a subclass to main. Careful calculations are typically made to decipher which subclass not only has the most effective loadout, but also which one fits your personal playstyle the best. However, most of the time, this decision boils down to one very simple criteria. Does it feel good? The problem with that, though, is that Stasis has been arguably the best subclass to use for the better part of 7 months now, thus completely taking away that freedom to actually make that choice for ourselves, while also feeling like we can adequately compete with those who do use Stasis. For the past few months, it's either been beat 'em or join 'em, and beating them proved to be a much more difficult road to travel than joining them. Now, with some pretty significant changes being made to the Revenant subclass, I believe players can now start to exercise that freedom to use whichever subclass they think fits them the best. The purpose of this video isn't about ranking which subclass is the best. Rather, I wanted to go over a few subclasses and builds that I think are going to be really fun and really strong to use in PvP. There's a few criteria I came up with when deciding which subclasses to cover. And just because a subclass is excluded from this video doesn't mean that it's a bad subclass, because any good player can make a subclass look like it belongs in the meta. The subclasses I chose for this video met the criteria I created, and this was based on what most hunters in PvP are usually seeking when they're trying to spec for their ideal build. The first piece of criteria these subclasses had to meet was that they needed to have high movement potential. This can be manifested in many different ways, from something as simple as our dodge ability and the exotics that enhance the benefits when we use our dodge ability, to the outplay ability of our supers and how they can be used to manipulate ourselves around the map. If the subclass showed signs of being able to cover a lot of ground, it could make the list. The second piece of criteria these subclasses had to meet was that they needed to have effective supers. Effective can be interpreted in two different ways. Either the super is a slaying super, meaning it is meant to get a bunch of kills, or it can also be a suppressing super, or a super that is good at shutting down guardians, and especially guardians that are in their supers. If the subclass could meet this criteria, it could make the list. The third piece of criteria that subclasses had to meet was that they needed to have a solid neutral game, either with or without the help from exotics. Neutral game is a very integral part in the course of a PvP match, because you're spending about 90% of the game using that neutral game. The only time when you're not using it is when you're in your super. So having a strong neutral game presence is a very crucial part of performing well in PvP. If the subclass showed signs of having a solid neutral game, it made the list. Now that we have the criteria out of the way, let's jump right into our first build. For this build, I actually think there's going to be two different options depending on what input method you use. If you're a mouse and keyboard player, I'm going to say top tree gunslinger, and for controller players, I'm going to say bottom tree gunslinger, and I'll explain my reasoning for this here in a second. Our class ability is going to be Gambler's Dodge, so that we can really capitalize on recharging those throwing knives. I almost always recommend Strafe Jump for PvP content, just because it allows for solid directional control, as it gives just a slight boost on your initial activation of the jump. And this is especially present when you've got Stompies on. As far as our grenade goes, you could really run any one of these, but I tend to lean towards trip mines now that you can actually stick them to your opponents. Now, as I said before, mouse and keyboard players, I'm actually going to recommend that you elect to go with Top Tree Gunslinger, and the main reason has to do with how you use the super. With Top Tree Gunslinger's super, you get a total of 6 golden gun shots that can be fired very quickly, almost to the likes of The Last Word, animation included. If you've ever watched a decent Top Tree Goldie play with their super, one thing you will notice is how quick and snappy they are when they're seeking out targets. I don't play with a mouse and keyboard, so I don't have a ton of experience with regards to performance, but I do know that the dexterity that mouse and keyboard offers for players is very optimal for this specific reason. Now, that's not to say that controller players can't be effective when using Top Tree Goldie, because you absolutely can. But the potential of scanning the map as efficiently as a mouse and keyboard input can provide is very hard to compete with, especially in the right hands. Controller players, I recommend you use Bottom Tree Gunslinger, and don't worry, this is no consolation prize. There's 2 key reasons why I suggest this tree for controller players. The first being the weighted throwing knife. The interesting thing about the weighted throwing knife is that it actually catches a little bit of that friction and magnetism during the animation of throwing the knife. As some of you are probably aware from my last video, the controller input provides the additional reticle friction and magnetism when shooting weapons. It also does this to the throwing knife, but to a lesser degree. The second reason controller players will massively benefit from using Bottom Tree is because of the perk Knock 'em Down, which states that precision kills increase weapon stability and handling. A huge benefit of using M&K is that you can more reliably manage the recoil of your weapons, in turn making them more stable. Controller players tend to have to adjust a little more with regards to the stability of a weapon. So if there is any way that a person using a controller can increase the ease of use of their weapons, they should absolutely be doing it. The absolutely cracked thing about this perk is that you can potentially have that increased stability and handling for 25 seconds at any given time. So anytime you get a precision kill, you'll see a buff on the side of your screen called Knock 'em Down, which starts counting down from 10 seconds. However, two things can happen once this timer appears on your screen. Anytime you get a non-precision kill, it will add about 4 or 5 seconds onto the time that is currently being shown. Anytime you get a precision kill while Knock 'em Down is active, it will add 10 seconds onto the time that is currently being shown. This can stack all the way up to that total of 25 seconds of increased stability and handling. Both of these subclasses really made themselves known in the effective super criteria and the solid neutral game criteria. All the way from the utility of the throwing knife, the potential for increased weapon efficiency, and their highly effective supers. I highly suggest giving top and bottom tree Goldie a real shot because they are very fun to play with. And who doesn't like killing people in one shot with a gun? Like, come on. Exotics I recommend for either of these subclass trees are Wormhusk Crown for that health regen after you dodge, Stompies for that increase to all of your movements, Young Ahamkara's Spine if you choose to run a Trip Mine Grenade, Ophidius Spaith for the 2 throwing knife charges, and the relatively new exotic Athris's Embrace, which makes it so your weighted throwing knife can bounce a second time and get increased damage depending on how many precision hits you get with your weapons beforehand. Any of these exotics will help enhance your build. Play around with some of them and see which one fits your playstyle the best. The next subclass is probably going to come as a surprise to no one, but I think it's going to be one of the best subclasses for hunters. Revenant Hunter, as well as the other Stasis subclasses, got the pickaxe from Bungie recently. Regardless of the nerfs to almost every single slow and freeze variation that the Revenant Hunter subclass has, I still think this particular build has a lot of potential in PvP. I went over this build in one of my previous videos, so I won't go as in depth in this video as I did in that one. I'll leave a link to that video down below. But all of the builds in that video except for this one seem to have been significantly affected by this recent Stasis patch. So let's talk about it. The focus of this build is going to be on our Glacier Grenade and utilizing it for a few different things. As for our abilities, these are always preferential, but I choose to run Gambler's Dodge and Strafe Jump, and then obviously Glacier Grenade. This first aspect in this build is Shatter Dive, which allows us to activate a quick descent to shatter anything that's near us, more specifically those Glacier Grenades. We'll talk more about that in a second. Our second aspect for this build is going to be Touch of Winter, which makes it so that our Glacier Grenade spawns 1 extra crystal, totaling 5, and changes the formation of those crystals from a straight line to a more circular shape. Not only does this aspect basically give us more damage potential with our Glacier Grenade, but it also allows us to use an extra slot for one of our fragments. Massive gains. As far as fragments go, there are 3 that will really gas up this build and turn it into an S tier option in my opinion. The first fragment, and arguably the most important, is going to be Whisper of Fissures, which will increase the damage and size of the burst when we destroy those stasis crystals. 100%, this is the most important fragment to use, otherwise you won't see near the lethality that it could just on its own. The next fragment is going to be Whisper of Chains. I gawk over this fragment all the time, so I apologize to the OGs of the channel for hearing this yet again, but this fragment has room for so much utility. Not only does it give us a plus 10 stat bump to our recovery just for being equipped, but anytime we stand near a friendly stasis crystal, we get 25% damage resistance. The key there is friendly, meaning it doesn't have to be from our crystal specifically. It can be from any crystals that are formed by our teammates as well. And actually, with the recent change to cold snaps, Bungie decided to make it so whenever a cold snap makes impact on the ground and activates, it will leave behind a small stasis crystal. That little tiny crystal will still activate the Whisper of Chains buff. You heard it, boys. It's not the size of the crystal that matters, it's how you use it. Our last fragment is going to be Whisper of Shards, which boosts our grenade cooldown whenever we shatter a stasis crystal. So in theory, anytime we shatter a crystal, the timer for the cooldown boost will reset. We also get a plus 10 to resilience. I don't have the exact numbers, but with Whisper of Shards and double bomber mods on your class item, you're basically adding extra tiers to your discipline stat. So if you've got a stat distribution that you love, but your discipline stat is lower than you'd like it to be, don't worry too much about it. You'll easily be able to make up for it by equipping those double bomber mods and by effectively using Whisper of Shards. This build shows up very prominently in all 3 of the criteria needed to make the video today. The potential for high movement with the exotic helmet Mask of Bakris is unparalleled. The effectiveness of the Silence and Squall super to potentially help shut down any roaming supers is really useful in both 6v6 and 3v3 game modes. And the neutral game is arguably the best in the game. Big, fat checks in each box. As for exotics, I am a massive fan of Mask of Bakris. A skilled enough player can make Bakris useful in any situation, whether it's to evade, go from cover to cover, heck, you can even use it aggressively. If you're not, there's still lots of options. Stompies will always be a good option no matter what subclass. Wormhusk Crown is also a decent option as well. If you're looking for just a complete utilitarian exotic, Dragon's Shadow is ridiculously good. Reloading all stowed weapons after dodging and also giving max handling to all weapons for a short period of time is insanely useful. A couple of other niche options could be the 6th Coyote to get that extra dodge ability charge, meaning you can use that to activate your double bomber mods. And finally, the Frosties are another option you could look to if you're really wanting to get your grenade back as fast as you can. Tons of options and creativity with this build, so test away. If you're new here and you've enjoyed the video so far, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's a totally free way to support me, so I'd really appreciate it. The last build is probably one of my all-time favorites, and it has been for many years. And if you've been playing Hunter for a while, you were probably waiting for this to come up. Middle Tree Night Stalker was, and now probably still is, one of the best subclass trees in the game, especially if you're someone who likes to snipe, which I'll talk about more in a second. The focus of this build is around stealth and capitalizing on the information we get from being stealthy. Again, we're going to be using Gambler's Dodge, and then we're also going to be using Void Wall as our grenade. Vortex Grenade is okay, but the only downside of it is that it actually takes a second or two for the AoE effect to begin its burn. Whereas with the Void Wall grenade, you get an instant AoE damage once a player gets tagged with it. This grenade is going to be combined with our Smoke Bomb, which will slow our enemies and damage them over time. Throwing both our Smoke Bomb and our grenade is commonly known as the Wombo Combo. The utility of the Wombo Combo is an extremely lethal option in PvP, behaving fairly close in function to how you might use the Shatter Dive Glacier Grenade combo. Flawless Execution is the perk that says whenever we get a precision kill while we're crouched, we're granted invisibility, gain increased range to our melee, and we also get something called True Sight. True Sight is basically like having wall hacks. Once activated, enemies located all over the map will be revealed by their red tinted silhouette, no matter where they are, even if they're behind multiple walls. After getting a precision kill, True Sight is activated for 4 seconds, so while it's not a super long experience, it can still provide some really important intel on where your opponents are located. This is why I said earlier that snipers really love using this subclass tree. Something as simple as getting a headshot with your sniper can activate True Sight, creating many opportunities for both you and your teammates. On top of all of this, we have yet to talk about the super Spectral Blades, one of the better roaming supers for PvP. Upon activation of Spectral Blades, our Guardian gets cast in a veil of shadows, completely being taken off your enemy's radar. That is until you decide to strike by using the light or heavy attack, both of which have different functions. The light attack is exactly as it sounds, a quick, light melee attack that projects you forward to KO your enemy. The heavy attack, though, is what makes this super special. Whenever you perform a light attack, you actually become visible on your enemy's radar. Whenever you use your heavy attack, you actually go back to being invisible until you decide to use your light attack again. Anytime you use your heavy attack, you also get True Sight to proc again. This time, it will stay activated until you, again, use your light attack, or your super runs out. So as long as the last action that you perform within your super is a heavy attack, you will have True Sight for the duration of your super. Once your super runs out, True Sight runs out as well. A dirty little secret that a lot of people might not know about Spectral Blades is that your super actually drains slower if you use your heavy attack. On screen, I should be showing you the difference between sitting in your super after performing a light attack versus using a heavy attack. So ideally, whenever you kill someone with your light attack, you will almost always want to follow it up by performing your heavy attack, even if no one is around. Not only will you gain that True Sight buff, but it will drain your super much slower as you're navigating the map to try to find your next target. Just something to keep in mind. This subclass checks all the boxes of the criteria with ease. The maneuverability of our super allows for quick and efficient movement around the map, while also proving to be a very lethal slaying option. The neutral game of the Wombo Combo and True Sight make for some incredible outplayability moments. With the recent nerfs to Stasis in PvP, this subclass once again becomes one of the top subclasses in the entire game. As far as exotics go, I'm sounding like a broken record here, but there's a reason why I keep recommending Stompies, especially for this type of build. High mobility and movement around the map is very important for a subclass like this, and Stompies are the perfect catalyst for that. Other exotics can be Wormhusk, Dragon's Shadow, and even Gwizzin Vest, which makes it so that each Spectral Blades kill you get before you go into stealth will restore more of your super energy. Not super important to have, but if using your super is what you're building around, then this might be a decent option for you. If there's another build that you think might be a solid option right now in PvP, tweet it at me or join the Discord and we can talk about it more. Thank you all for watching. Liking the video was always appreciated, and as always, we'll see ya.